Welcome back to another episode of From the Couch Sports. I am your host, Connor, and if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. I got a lot to kind of go over today. We have had some incredible last couple days of March Madness. We had an awesome fight card on the weekend in London for UFC. So I got a lot I want to kick into. Let's start off talking about the UFC event that we had this weekend. This was the first time the UFC was back in London since 2019, and they put on an insane fight card. So on the total fight card, there was only 3 decisions, and every other fight was a finish. And there were some really fun fights on this. The main event was Tom Aspinall going up against Alexander Volkov, and Aspinall showed like he's the real deal. He's ready for that next step up in competition. He cracked into the top 5 with this. He really dominated this fight against a very tough opponent. He went in there and he was doing pretty good on the feet. And then just the way he was able to go into his takedowns and he was able to finish using his jiu-jitsu. And that was kind of something underrated that not a lot of people were talking about. Aspinall's jiu-jitsu game, and he showed that he's a mixed martial artist. He's not just gonna stand up and box you. He's got a full all around game. I'm really interested to see him going forward in his career. Volkov is always gonna be one of those guys who's dangerous in that top 10 of the division. So Aspinall getting this win, that was very big for him. And then the co-main was also a super fun fight. It lasted. Didn't last too long, but it was a crazy firefight. This is Arnold Allen going in there and getting a big win in dominating fashion over Dan Hooker. To me, it's kind of hard to see Dan Hooker lose like this. He's a guy I root for. I like Arnold Allen too, but I don't like seeing a guy consistently get KO'd and whatnot. And Dan Hooker he literally has faced the best of the best lately. And, sometimes when you do that, you go on a losing streak. And, he lost his last 2. I know the one before this was against Islam. And then he had the fight in between that he won with Nasserat. But before that, he lost to Michael Chandler. And he had the crazy war with Dustin Poirier. And even before that, in a fight that he won, the fight with Paul Felder, that was a war as well. So, Dan Hooker's he's been through some wars, and I hope he's able to rebound from this fight. But also, Arnold Allen showed that he's a true threat at 145. He goes into this fight, and it's just a complete firefight. He's throwing bombs on Hooker, and Hooker's able to land a couple shots back to kind of wobble Allen, but Allen just kept pushing forward, and he was able to take the fight and get the finish. That was a really fun fight. I'm curious to see where Allen goes. He's basically undefeated. He's got the one loss before he was in the UFC, so he's undefeated in the UFC at 145. Sky's the limit for him, that's for sure. And then another fight on this card was the Paddy Pimblett fight. Paddy he's the real deal. He for sure is a big he's a new big name in MMA, that's for sure. How far he's able to take this. Obviously time will tell. It's not like he's facing any top 10 opponents, anybody that's super dangerous. And then in both of the fights he's been in, he's kind of got clipped. But part of what makes him so exciting, it's the character, it's the skills on the mic, but also when he's in a fight, it's not like he's just outright dominating every fight. He's in close fights, and I think part of that is very entertaining to watch. Like a guy who can win and lose at any given moment. And especially some of these things that happen are like what Oliveira's been able to work through. The very difficult kind of loss, or very difficult kind of you get wobbled in a fight, but you're able to push through and still come out on top. So that's very impressive. I don't know if we're gonna ever see a reality where Paddy Pimblett becomes the UFC champion. That would be crazy if we ever did. But nonetheless, he's a super entertaining guy to watch. And win lose, he seems like the kind of guy who's gonna be an entertaining guy regardless. And then before the Paddy fight was Gunnar Nelson. He used a heavy jiu-jitsu game. Basically, in all 3 rounds, he was able to take his opponent's back and then just kind of keep it there, keep his opponent's back. Takashi Soto, he did a really good job preventing the choke, but having Gunnar Nelson on his back, he wasn't really able to do anything. So that was one of the fights that did go to decision, but Gunnar Nelson got a really nice win, and especially for not fighting for a few years, that's good to get back in the win column like that, or get a big win after a couple years. And the fight before this was one of the craziest women's fights ever. Molly McCann and Luana Carolina. The first round, Molly kind of rocked her, and it looked like she was just kind of unloading the tank, trying to get her out of there. And then she was able to kind of keep that momentum through round 2. So she was winning this fight. But then round 3 came along, and it looks like Molly might have ran out of gas because she had been trying to put her out for so long. And then she set up the perfect spinning elbow that knocked her out cold. And I mean, this was one of the most brutal women's knockouts I've ever seen. Like, you don't really ever in most women's MMA fights, you don't see full on knocked out cold. You see a lot of TKOs. A girl will get dropped with a head kick. That happens a lot, but very rarely. And I mean, I can't even think of many other instances. Very rarely, you actually fully knock your opponent out cold. And this knockout that Molly had in front of the home crowd in the 3rd round of a fight that looked like she was really tired in, that was one of the craziest knockouts ever. Carolina was on the ground for minutes. It took some time for her to get up because she was literally knocked out cold. And that was a brutal knockout. Molly's been getting a lot of hate because after she got the knockout, she jumped into the crowd and grabbed a replica UFC belt, and she was running around with it. But you gotta understand the emotions that are going on through this moment. She just had one of the craziest women's knockouts in UFC history. She's in front of her home crowd, and I mean, that's got to be the best moment of her career for sure. And I can't judge someone for celebrating one of the best moments of their lives. Some might say it's corny, whatever. It's just celebrating. Like, people do all kinds of things after celebrating and whatnot. So I'm not gonna judge her for that. I thought the fight was awesome to see, and then the finish was crazy. That's gonna be, probably in contention for one of the best finishes of the year. And then the fight that kicked off the main card in London was the Jai Herbert Ilia Topuria fight. This was crazy. The first round, Herbert was able to land a couple big shots that looked like he was going to put Topuria out. He landed a big head kick that dropped him. But then the second round came, and Ilia he pushed forward, and he just landed this crazy combination that he had a hook to the body, and then he followed it up with an overhand right that just landed perfectly and knocked Herbert out. That was a crazy fight. I'm curious to see Ilia going forward. Does he want to stay at 155, or is he going to go back down to 145? I know they're kind of setting up the fight with Paddy if they want to book that. Obviously, you got the background for that. If you do make it can be interesting. And then, we also had a really fun undercard. And a lot of these fights were just huge fights. But let's see here. Just going over some of my favorites. So the Paul Craig fight was crazy. So very beginning of the fight, Paul Craig, he gets put on his back, and Nikita Krylov is just throwing hammer fists down on him. He looks like he's in a very tough position multiple times, and he just stays on his back the whole round. And then, the moment he kind of pushes off for some separation, He throws up a triangle and submits him. And then just it happened so quick. It was a very fun submission. Paul Craig getting wins like that is just it's awesome to see because it's not what you typically see. And part of the it's also he totally came back in that fight too. So that was just a fun fight. He called out Anthony Smith after the fight, which I think would be a really fun fight as well. I thought that was a really good fight, especially for something on the prelims. That was a huge fight. And then another big one was the Jack Shore versus Timur Valiev. This was a crazy high-paced fight, grappling, striking. It had everything in it. Jack Shore just pushed the pace. The first 2 rounds, it was very close. And then in the third round, Shore kind of pulled away. There was a couple moments that he had in the third round where he looked like he was close to getting the finish. So that was a really fun fight as well. Shore looks to be like a legit contender. He's undefeated, and he just picked up a very big win as well. And then another fight. This was the fight that kicked off the fight card in London. That's how crazy this was. Was Mohamed Makayev versus Cody Durden. And this fight ended crazy fast. So this ended in the first minute. Makayev landed a perfect flying knee that dropped Durden, and then he just moved straight into a submission and submitted him. And within a minute, I think they said it was like one of the fastest, like top 2 or 3 fastest submissions in the flyweight weight class. And he definitely looks like a threat in this division. He's undefeated. He's got an extensive record for amateur results in MMA as well. And he looks like he's going to be a legit contender going forward. And then it looks like the UFC is going to try to book him somewhat soon as well. So I'm very curious to see where that goes. Some other fights I want to see, like based on the fight card we just had, I just wanted to kind of talk about. And most of these I think were the fights that guys were calling out. The Paul Craig Anthony Smith matchup, I think that would be a ton of fun. Tom Aspinall called out Tai Tuivasa. That would be crazy. Those are, that could be like maybe not a title eliminator, but it's, those two dudes match up, your 2 top 5 contenders. You're one step closer to the belt. I think that would be a fun matchup for everyone. Arnold Allen called out Calvin Kattar. That would be a crazy matchup. And that's the next, another next step up for him. Possibly you look at the winner of that fight as fighting for the belt next. Especially the way that Calvin just won his last fight against Giga. And then just another funny thing. I don't know. That 155 is just so deep. I'm not even sure who they should match Patty up with next. But Patty calling out Mark Zuckerberg was pretty funny as well. And then moving on, I want to talk about some football, and then we're going to get to the NCAA tournament. Today, Matt Ryan was traded to the Colts for a 3rd-round pick this year. That's crazy. I think this. I was really pulling for the Colts to get Baker Mayfield. But Matt Ryan, he might have a higher ceiling for a shorter period of time. But I do like the pickup. Matt, it's funny because the Falcons trade Matt Ryan, and they actually end up eating a crazy amount of dead cap space. But Matt Ryan finally gets to go to a team that he's going to have a good opportunity to win with. And he's on a team that's significantly better than any of the Falcons teams he's had for years. And then, the Colts have a bunch of cap space too, so they could potentially add another piece to the O-line, maybe get a receiver. There's been talk of like maybe they go out and try to bring Julio in. Something like that would be really fun. But Matt Ryan gives them a veteran QB. I think he has the potential to be a lot better than Wentz was for them. You got an emerging superstar running back with Jonathan Taylor. And they got some good receivers too, Michael Pittman Jr. The defense is just stacked too. So, and they just traded for Yannick Ngakoue too. So this defense is legit. And now you add Matt Ryan to a team that could be a QB away from going potentially on a deep playoff run. And then a couple other moves that were made. So with this, Matt Ryan going to the Colts, the Falcons signed Marcus Mariota, and it looks like he's pairing back with Arthur Smith, who is his offensive coordinator on the Titans. And I think that's a solid pickup. Mariota is one of those guys who's like he can be a low end starter, and maybe they can get more out of him. He's still a guy who has some good upside. He was the number 2 overall pick not a whole long time ago, and then the number one overall pick from that same year, Jameis Winston, just re-signed with the Saints as well. So a couple of moving pieces there for the NFC QBs. I do really like this move for the Colts. I do wonder a couple things though. Does this mean that the Falcons could potentially be open to drafting a QB? And then it's also like, what happens with Jimmy G? What happens with Baker Mayfield? There is some other kind of up in the air things. But I think slowly, we're a little bit over a week since like the start of um, like the free agency tampering period and everything like that. So I think some things are kind of sorting themselves out. But we still do have quite a bit of time before the NFL draft and everything like that. And then I did want to touch on a couple other like draft things. One really sad story. David Ojabo, the defensive end or outside linebacker from Michigan, he was at his pro day. He's a potential top 15 pick, and he tore his Achilles. And then they kind of just continued the pro day, like, just moved down a little bit, and it was like, come on, guys, like that. I didn't think that was the best look. It's super unfortunate that he's likely going to slide in the draft because of this, because torn Achilles, he's not going to be able to play anytime soon. But I still hopefully, sometimes guys slide and they end up on better teams because of it. So hopefully something like this can happen, because it's super unfortunate that he had to suffer such a big injury when he's preparing to go professional. And then another couple, quick thing. There has been some buzz rising as far as the QB class. Potential Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, one or both of them potentially even going in the top 10. Obviously, we'll see further on how things like that play out. But there's a ton of moving pieces in the NFL right now. The QB carousel is crazy, and I think we've only just begun. I think we still got a lot of moves to see in these coming weeks. And then moving on, we had a crazy weekend of basketball, college basketball. This is the round of 32, getting to the Sweet 16. I'm going to touch on, I'll cover the games that stood out the most to me that I watched. But there was a lot of really good games this weekend. This was Saturday night, Memphis and Gonzaga. So Memphis was up 10 points at the half. And in the second half, Drew Timme comes out and he just dominates for Gonzaga. I think he had 21 point. He had over 20 points in the second half. And this guy's his post game at the college level, his skill set is just off the charts. This is a guy who's just got such a deep post game. He's scoring in multiple different ways, shooting fadeaways, hook shots, just you name it. Great, getting a bunch of rebounds as well. And then, Gonzaga had some other guys step up. And Andrew Nemhard, he stepped up big. He had 23 points. And then, one of the guys that's like a potential top 5 pick, Chet Holmgren, he didn't have a bunch of points. He definitely struggled at points. Memphis had Jalen Duren on him, another really big athletic post. And this is a guy who's also going to probably be a top pick in the draft. He was guarding Holmgren for a lot of the game, prior to some of his foul trouble. And so Holmgren didn't have a crazy game, points-wise, but you can still see like the impact he makes on the floor. He still was making an impact in the rebounding game, and then, he's always a threat with making a ton of blocks and everything. But Drew Timmy just really carried this team. He carried them to the win. They were able to bounce back from being down at the half. So that was a super fun game to watch. New Mexico State lost to Arkansas. And then St. Peter's is continuing the Cinderella story. They beat Murray State 70-60, and they're the third 15 seed in the tournament's history to reach the Sweet 16. So it's kind of funny. In 2012, the Florida Gulf Coast team, this was the team that was like high flying, ton of dunks. They went to the Sweet 16, and then just last year we saw Oral Roberts go to the Sweet 16. But nonetheless, like a 15 seed making it that far, that's pretty historic, and they've been playing really good too. I'm curious to see just how far they're able to go. And then Michigan was able to upset Tennessee. This was a back and forth game before Michigan was able to close it out. Kansas had a close game against Creighton. They were able to edge that victory out. And then another big one. This was also Saturday. Baylor lost to number 8 North Carolina. Being the 1 seed and losing to the 8 seed's tough. UNC is just on fire right now. They just beat Duke a couple weeks ago, and now they took down the number 1 seed Baylor. This was a tough game though. UNC was up 25 points, and then Baylor just edged themselves back into the game. Baylor was playing some crazy full court defense. They were able to get a ton of turnovers off of this, and then they were able to come back into the game and force overtime. But they also, there was moments where they just made mistakes, just poor shots, and in overtime they let UNC kind of steal some momentum back and reclaim the win. But it was a crazy game nonetheless. And then Houston was able to pull away from Illinois 68-53. Villanova beat Ohio State. And then Duke Michigan State was also a really fun game. This guy Paulo Banchero, he's another top 5 pick in this upcoming draft most likely. He made a couple really nice plays. He had a big block, and then he just took it to the hoop when it mattered the most. Duke is just they're such a stacked team. AJ Griffin's good. They got Roach, Moore, Williams. Just a really good collective group of guys. Multiple guys that are top NBA picks. I think when Duke puts it together, their high end could be, their ceiling could be winning a national championship. But they're also, they're in closer games, and depending on how they play, that'll ultimately dictate that. And then Iowa State was able to beat Wisconsin. Texas Tech beat Notre Dame. And then Miami, the number 10 seed, was able to upset number 2 seed Auburn 79-61. And this was also another kind of disappointing game from a guy who's supposed to be a top 15 pick, or actually a top 3 pick likely, Jabari Smith. This guy, some people are saying he's the number 1 pick. Others have him like in the top 3, top 4. But nonetheless, like, this is a guy you see the potential on the court. Even in the game that he shot 3 for 16 from the field and 1 for 8 from 3. But he was still able to manage 15 rebounds and 3 blocks. So he's still making an impact on the game, even when he's struggling offensively. But the thing for Auburn was they weren't able to get someone else to step up on the offensive game. They were put in position where they just have to kind of shoot threes, try to come back into it. There was moments where they were in the game, but ultimately Miami was able to pull away at the end of the game. So that was a tough loss for Auburn. And then number 6 Texas versus the number 3 seed Purdue. This kid Jaden Ivey, he's another top 5 pick. He came up and had some crazy plays. He didn't do hardly anything in the first half. I don't even think he shot an actual shot. He had like 2 points just from free throws, 2 or 3 points from free throws. But then in the second half, like, he came up and made big plays when it mattered the most. He had a 3 that basically sealed the game, and then he had another big dunk earlier in the game that was key, like momentum shifter. He's a legit guy. We'll see him at the next level. And then to close out the game, the weekend, Arizona and TCU. This was probably the best game of the whole weekend. This was just crazy back and forth. Towards the end of the game, TCU was up, and then Arizona's star, this guy's another NBA candidate, Benedict Mathurin. He was able to hit he hit a nice three to kind of bring. I think he hit a three to tie the game, I want to say. But basically, like any time that he needed, so basically he led them to overtime, just all over, like defensively, getting rebounds, scoring in the paint, hitting the big threes. Like big play after big play. He had a crazy dunk earlier in the game, and then so like this comes down to right before overtime. The game is tied, and TCU gets the ball, and they lose it. The guard literally falls around the half court mark, drops the ball, and one of the players on Arizona picked it up and ran and dunked it, but they were like a second too late. So it led to overtime. In overtime, Mothram was able to take over. This is another guy. Like, there's multiple guys in this tournament that are super fun to watch. Guys that we're going to be seeing next year in the NBA. And even guys that are just dominating in the college level that's fun to watch. So I'm excited to see this next coming weekend. Sweet 16 basketball is going to be super fun. See what teams come out of that. We also got another UFC card coming up this weekend. More NFL news daily whenever these stories come out. As always, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. But stay tuned for more later this week.